Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Open Views, the Belvo podcast and now video cast. I'm Sebastián de Lara, I'm your host, and I'm extremely happy and extremely honored to present two marvelous people who I'm lucky enough to call my friends, but also are huge pioneers and trailblazers in open finance, not only in Mexico, not only in the UK, but in the world. First, we have Héctor Cabrera from the UK Embassy, where he is head of financial services. And last but not least, we have the amazing, the wonderful, the rock star of open finance, Helen Child from Open Banking Excellence. Héctor, Helen, thank you so much for joining us. It's a true privilege to have you here with us today.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It has been a wonderful trip to Mexico. Hector and his team have worked very hard and kept me very busy. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Well, wonderful. Well, let's get right into it. We're going to discuss a few things about Mexico because in our previous podcasts, we've talked about the UK, we've talked about the US, but it'd be good to zoom into Mexico and then zoom back out and talk about the rest of the world. So, Helen, I would basically ask you, what have you seen in the rest of the world other than the UK, other than the usual places, key aspects and interesting issues and really cases where you can call them success cases around open finance, open banking in the world? Tell us a little bit about that.
That's a great question, and where to start. So when OBE launched its Global Open Finance Index at the beginning of the year, we did that in collaboration with the UK government, the data scientists at Oxford University, Accenture, the World Bank, and NatWest, and our friends at Innovate Finance. We surveyed 42 countries. So when we were talking before over coffee, I've just chosen a couple of countries. So let's have a look at countries other than the UK, because I've talked a lot about the UK this week. But let's look at Australia, okay? And they have something called their consumer data rights, okay? Not a great accent, I'll give you that. But that goes beyond open finance and is truly cross-industry. And Australia started with open finance, which is already evolving into open utilities, open energy, and open telecoms. Now, with the CDR, the consumer data rights, it started with phase one bank data from 4 banks. So 4 major banks were playing in this. And if anyone who wants to know more about it, there's a whole chapter on this in the index. So you can download it at our website. But the 4 major banks started with savings, current accounts, and credit and charge cards. Now, the interesting thing with Australia is that the CDR enshrines in law the principle that your consumer's financial utility and telco information is ours. So it's doing what we've done in the UK. It's democratizing your data. It's giving you control of your data. And so that principle is universal. It's global. But it's gone a lot. Australia's gone a lot further and a lot broader than Europe. And it covers products that's expanded well beyond banking into utilities and telco data. And just one other interesting fact before we sort of do our world tour here is the ACC, the central body responsible for the CDR ecosystem. So lots of jargon there. They are collaborating with industry and standards data beyond banks to implement this new right now. So it's incredible. So Australia would be a country to watch. And what I would say is, given what I've observed and heard in Mexico, and with all the energy that's happening, and I know we're going to talk about sort of observations in a moment, but as well as looking at the UK, Australia would be a great country for Mexico to learn from, and so you can learn, you can leapfrog, and you can lead. Those would be my 3 key words this week. So that's a whistle-stop tour of Australia. Then if we look at the States, so just north of where we are here, and something exciting is happening in the States. And what we're doing at Open Banking Excellence is we are having an index refresh, and that's called the Index Refresh US. Not a creative name, but open banking supersized. And because of the colossal market there, you have the scale. Now, just by way of a little bit of background to the US, Ronit Chopra, he's the Director of Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, so the CFPD. They recently announced the imminent arrival of US open banking rule. So that's taking it to another level. And we all know there's big global operators, such as we were talking before, such as Plaid, big friend of OBEs that are already operating there. But the adoption of open banking APIs has been largely market driven. So again, if we refer it back to what the data will tell us from the index, the difference between a market-driven environment and a regulatory-driven environment, in a regulatory-driven environment, the ecosystem will get further, faster, and have more complex use cases, and it is a more sustainable ecosystem. So the US has had a market-driven ecosystem, and it's now changing to a regulatory environment. And I actually think there'll be a lot of very, very interesting market dynamics. Now, in the States, in the US, they use the technical standards, the same for the US and Canada, and that's all from FTX. So FTX are leading the way with the API standards there. Now, just some stats before we move on. As of April 2023, 53 million, I just want to refer to my notes here, 53 million consumer accounts are now using FTX API for open finance data sharing. It's a large number because you've got the scale in the States. But since FTX's last report in 2022, nearly 11 million additional consumer accounts were transitioned to the FTX API. And my last stat is that there is API calls have increased to 3.6 billion, that's with a B, per month, which is colossal, isn't it? Absolutely colossal. And the key takeaways from the latest speech from Ronit says really it's about market fairness and market standards and having a very open market that is fair to all. So as you would expect from the States, they're starting as they mean to go on, having a very fair and competitive landscape. And I think and they're saying that the agency mustn't micromanage the standards and mustn't micromanage the ecosystem. So it is fair for all. So I think that's really exactly what you would expect America to do. And I think that is a country to watch. Because of the size and because of their heritage, they already have a colossal base from which to lead. So we can put more on our website about this. But that's the US, that's the States. But there is another country that I would like to mention because I think Mexico could learn from this one as well, and that's India. And India have a not too dissimilar problem with financial inclusion, and it's that they have done a lot in that country to start to shift the dial for the underbanked and the unbanked. And what they have recently announced, and it's actually the rebranding of something that's been 5 years in the making. So as you know, with being in public policy, these things don't happen overnight. Is the National Financial Information Registry, and this was announced in the last union budget. And what basically this is it's a registry for financial and ancillary information, and it's basically a large central national credit bureau. And just imagine if you can have access to everybody's information that the government has, how you can change the dynamics of a lending decision, how you can change the dynamics of opening an account. And once you have an account opened, life can be very, very different. And that's what they're doing in India. So I think part of the learnings when maybe Mexico wants to have, just look at what they're doing in India and maybe put it on your roadmap, because that will go part way to informing you around financial inclusion.
Thank you. No, and it's very interesting to listen about Australia, about the US, about India, where you could say that there are a lot of similarities with Mexico. So I'd like to ask Héctor, if you could kind of talk us through the story of open finance in Mexico, how it began, where we were, where we are today, and then we can kind of put things together and see where we need to move forward. And also I'd like to listen from both of you, what you think will continue to happen. So Héctor, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sebastián. First of all, I want to say thank you for having us here, for hosting us. Belvo has been an incredible partner in our quest to bring open finance to become a reality in Mexico and Latin America as well. So to give you a bit of background into what has happened in Mexico, the British Embassy first started collaborating with the Mexican government and the ecosystem, the local ecosystem, to assess the possibility of incorporating open finance into regulation in Mexico back in 2016 and 17. Really, when the Mexican fintech law was shaping up, we were doing sort of technical advisory efforts for Mexican regulators back then. In 2018, we commissioned the first experimental policy roadmap for open finance in Mexico, which was delivered by the Open Data Institute and a Mexican consultancy called C-Minds. That piece of work you can still find online if you really search for it, and it can give you a very sort of archive type snapshot of what the thinking was back then, when banks were still quite skeptic about open finance in general. We conducted a number of interviews with banks and fintechs and the ecosystem in general to produce that piece of work. So yeah, if you go back and find that online, you can see what the thought process was back then. From there, the Mexican fintech law in 2018 was published, and it incorporated Article 76, which opens up the open finance idea. It allows for the regulator to issue secondary regulation around open data, around aggregated data, and transactional data, which is sort of what's important for us, I believe, and what's crucial for the future of open finance in Mexico. We've been supporting the Mexican regulator to try to issue secondary regulation, and we're at a pace where we believe something might be brewing. So hopefully something will come up soon. But what I can tell you, what I've seen the evolution of open finance in Mexico be, is, and we were talking about this earlier, it's a shift from a very technical and technology-focused approach by the regulators, sort of around the infrastructure of open finance, to a use case-based approach. And I think that's a privilege that we've had by waiting to issue secondary regulation, because it has allowed the rest of the world to build use cases from which we can, as Helen has rightly said throughout the week, leapfrog with. So I think we're now at a very unique position to take up from what other countries have done and take those use cases that can be relevant to the Mexican market and yeah, really take off from that. That's my thing, I think.
No, absolutely. I think we had a very important law established in 2018. As you mentioned, Article 76 really outlines what open finance should look like, because it goes beyond just banking in Mexico. And there really hasn't been anything done since then. But we've seen that in parallel, at the same time or afterwards, countries like Brazil, countries like Australia, countries like India, countries like the US, and absolutely, of course, countries like the UK, who I would say are the father and mother of open banking, have really advanced. And okay, so we took a long time to do something about it. No, it's been practically 5 years. So what do we do next?
That's a great question. Okay, so you are where you are. So the last time I was in Mexico City, I was working here, and I was leading a large global project. And that's when I really understood that Mexico is a global financial center. You know, so I'll just say that again, Mexico is a global financial center. So you have the infrastructure, you have the knowledge within your market. So for 5 years, you've been, if we go back to the index, we would categorize you as a watcher. But you have now this, what I have observed, this real energy in the market. And that's in great part to the work that Hector and the team at the British Embassy are doing. But, you know, and yourself, all the work that the Mexican FinTech Association are doing. And now is this momentum in the market, and you can almost feel and taste something is about to happen. And we've had a lot of very, very encouraging conversations behind the scenes. So without sort of preempting anything, this call for secondary regulation has been heard at the very, very highest level. Indeed, at the first Mexican FinTech Week, you know, there was a call to have it, you know, they said that we're going to have it urgently. And hopefully that will be before the next election. So what I've observed is, A, you've got real energy in the market, and you do have that advantage, and it's a true advantage to learn, to leapfrog, and then to lead. So bring it right back to how I started answering this question. Mexico is a global financial center. Rightly, when you go out now with open finance, you are in a position to lead. And the other thing I would say, sort of to wrap up this bit, is that I have met so many warm, wonderful people, but also so many very, very, very talented people. You have an absolute bedrock of talent, and that's before open banking, open finance has even started. So unlike a lot of countries that, you know, have the regulation and then do the ecosystem engagement, Mexico have the true advantage of having the ecosystem. That's banks and fintechs. I think that's possibly unique. You know, champing at the bit. You know, let us out. We've got use cases we want to deliver, and we're just waiting for the regulation. And I think that puts you in not only a unique situation, but in a position that is one of true leadership.
Oh, absolutely. Héctor, what are you seeing?
What I'm seeing is, as Helen has mentioned, a shift in the thought process of the ecosystem itself. From back when we started trying to push open finance in Mexico to happen, it was very regulatory led. So it was the regulators who were very interested in making this happen. And the interest from the private sector was limited. Right now, it's the other way around, I would say, where the private sector is sort of spearheading efforts to try to come to a consensus, try to make it happen, and make it happen soon. And it's really when the private sector has sat down and being inclusive in which companies they include in that conversation, not only sort of traditional banks and fintechs, but also including the wider financial sector in Mexico, that things have been moving forward. And I believe it has enriched the conversation. It has positioned the topic in another level that it wasn't months back, I'd say. And it's really thanks to the effort of associations, of policy teams in fintechs, in banks, in Sofipos, Sofomes, that lead this conversation internally within their own sort of teams. I think the next step is really to sell it inward in companies, and I think that's a challenge. But one of my key recommendations is for companies to empower their policy people and to embed them into the company as business areas, not as sort of public-facing areas only, but as real internal business areas that can help you deliver your business objectives. I think that's what needs to happen in order for this conversation to be threaded throughout organizations.
No, absolutely. The momentum has built immensely. our listeners, our viewers, they're quite familiar with use cases, particularly around lending. It's something that we've discussed in the Open Views series. I'd like to ask you, Helen, if you could talk about the use case of the HMRC, and if you could talk about what the HMRC is and how really open banking triggered something very important in the UK.
Thank you. That would be my absolute pleasure. So HMRC stands for His Majesty's Revenue and Customs. So that is our tax collection agency. And we in the UK have made collecting taxes exciting. Who could ever have believed that? So HMRC, there's a couple of really key points. They have collected some numbers for you. 14 billion with a B of taxes, and that is just from one tax time. That is for self-assessment. So most people in the UK, if they filled in their self-assessment form online, have made an open banking transaction, and they didn't know they had. And I think that's a message that, you know, those of us in the industry should just be very aware of. You know, if you can make the user journey, you know, seamless and far better than the alternative, open banking can become mainstream. So 14 billion of taxes collected. Now, what drove that decision, what drove that use case, was HMRC wanted to take out card acquiring fees. It really was that simple. So an account-to-account transaction. But what we found as a secondary saving was, because an account-to-account transaction, there's zero transactions go into a suspense account, there wasn't any reconciliation issues. Therefore, you got further cost savings with those internal efficiencies. So I have recently been appointed to advise HMRC on their future strategy for use cases. So I'm on their payments panel, which is a true privilege. And what we're doing now is looking at taking that use case across other tax types. So again, there's going to be, you know, those efficiencies are going to be replicated for the government. But here's where it gets really exciting. During the course of 24, so next year, we will be releasing APIs, or an API that the working premises, it will be issued free of charge to the ecosystem. So that's, you know, international banks, that's challenger banks, that's fintechs that can embed it into their product. So just imagine if you were a fintech and you had, you know, you wanted to have access to somebody's mortgage data. You know, you could actually find out that they were being, you know, they were being paid regularly, because we pay a tax on our earnings in the UK, pay as you earn. Just imagine if you were offering a product around pensions. We have something called national insurance, which is now a tax that goes into our pensions pot. So we have all these tax types that that can inform decisions, and that is where fintechs can work their magic to give a better service. And it's where some of the challenger banks now wanted to put in forecasting tools for their smaller business. Some of the more international banks want to encourage clients outside the UK to come to the UK because there's an easier place to do business. But we have one bank in the UK at this moment of time that does VRP. Just imagine if you could pay all your taxes by variable recurring payment. You know, that is an absolute game changer and a shift, not just for you, HMRC collecting taxes, but for the whole ecosystem in the UK. So it's good for the government. We collect more taxes efficiently, and there's huge cost savings. It's absolutely amazing for the ecosystem that we're getting that embedded process, and we're getting that stickiness and volume. We all work in a volume-driven industry, so that volume is key. And it's absolutely terrific for the UK because it gives me the opportunity to showcase one of the best use cases in the world. So thank you for giving me the opportunity.
No, and it's absolutely great for the regular people, because one of the biggest problems, and it occurs in Mexico and it occurs all over the world, is it's quite difficult to pay taxes. So this will make it a lot easier. And that's one of the things that I love about open finance, is it's a win-win-win situation. Every side of of the whole process of the system wins. There's no one who's losing. No, you, and this brings to better financial inclusion. Héctor, I don't know if you can tell us a little bit of how you think that open finance can boost financial inclusion in Mexico.
Yeah, sure thing. I think financial inclusion was not at the forefront of why the UK started implementing open banking itself. The UK came from a competition angle, trying to facilitate people from switching banks. So it was a remedy to try to solve that. In Mexico, in countries like Mexico and India, for example, the implications have the potential to be quite different. And it's, in fact, when we talk about financial inclusion, let's not just think about access, but also about the quality of products offered, and going from underserved to having a good array of products that you can use according to your specific needs. Richer data can help us achieve that. So basically, I mean, as Helen said, the biggest use case is lending at the moment. Mexico is a lending-driven economy. So by having richer data, banks, fintechs, and third-party providers can position credit as it is really needed to become more productive, to avoid a completely consumerist side or approach to lending, and have it become more productive, to promote financial health of people, to embed financial inclusion principles in product design, which I believe it was mentioned by the regulator as one of their key sort of priorities for fintech in Mexico. So yeah, I mean, we keep talking about how AI will change the face of the financial services industry. AI is nothing without data. So if we don't have the proper mechanisms for data to be shared with consent safely, with a clear legal responsibility framework, we won't get the innovation we're expecting from fintech. So this is open finance is the cornerstone for innovation going forward. I do believe that.
Precisely, and that's what we believe at Belvo. Lending is good as long as it's done intelligently with data and with knowledge of what the whole situation is and what that user needs the money for, and to know how much you can lend them without putting them in a bad situation, or even you might even be able to lend them more by having more information, and this could even help their lives. Thank you both so much for this wonderful podcast and video cast. Now, it's been a pleasure to have you here at Belvo. It's been a pleasure to have you on Open Views, and I hope we're able to do round 2 in the near future.
I would love to come back. So I hope to see you soon.
Perfect.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And if you'd like to engage with the embassy's initiatives on open finance, reach out. We're here to listen to you and see how we can onboard you in our.
And can I just say one final thing?
Yes.
I would like to say thank you for everybody that's given me such a warm welcome during this visit, as well as the whole of the embassy team that have worked so hard behind the scenes. But I would like to wish you and your FinTech Association all the luck in the world, and anything that we can do to help you with open banking excellence, just simply ask. Because creating that organization, having done it myself, takes amazing energy. It's exhilarating, but it's also exhausting too. So, but without you bringing everybody together to work in collaboration, you don't get that momentum. So hats off to you and all of your team around you. Good luck.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. We're learning from the best, and we'll continue to do so. And I hope one of our future episodes is to talk about how Mexico implemented open finance. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for listening to Open Views. We hope to have you with us in the near future. Thanks so much.